Chapter 19. Anita tried to steady her breath as she headed for the curtain. Everything was happening so fast now. Someone was handing her the 2 leashes for Norman and Belinda and instructing her not to get tangled in them, and then they were counting down as Mr. DeVille called her name. The dogs looked up at Anita expectantly. "Go," a worker instructed. Anita exhaled and started to walk, and the dogs thankfully did the same. She emerged from the curtain just as Mr. DeVille said her name. "And for our final model of the night, may I present my daughter Stella's friend, Anita Weatherby." Anita stepped into the spotlight and tried not to wince under the intense lighting. It was so blinding. It took a moment for her eyes to adjust. She let Norman and Belinda take the lead, finding their way to the catwalk, and tried to focus on her directives. Walk to the beginning of catwalk. Stop. Pose left. Pose right. Wait 5 seconds. Begin walking to the end of the runway. Stop. Do the same thing again. Turn and walk slowly back. She could feel her heart pounding, her chest vibrating as she heard a round of applause at her entrance. She tried to calm herself by listening to the melody Theodore Radcliffe was playing as she walked, but it did little to assuage her fears. Everyone was looking at her. Everyone. This was to be expected, but she couldn't remember the last time she felt seen. Maybe it was when she'd had to present that drawing she did at Maddie last year in art class, or when her fifth form teacher, Mr. Hildebrandt, asked everyone on the first day of school to stand up and say something interesting about themselves. Anita had held up her sketchbook, but was too nervous to show any of the actual drawings. Norman and Belinda gave a tug on their leashes, and Anita was pulled forwards, trying to stay steady on the heels Stella had suggested. Thankfully, she wouldn't see anyone's faces, only their silhouettes, as she focused on taking one step at a time. She made it through the initial pose and began the long walk down the runway, where she spotted a shelter representative at the end of the catwalk, waiting with the treat for both dogs to motivate them to keep going. She knew another shelter worker would be waiting at the other end of the stage to do the same thing. The dogs seemed unnerved by the crowd, but Anita could feel the diamond practically pulsing on her neck. Where were her parents and Lizzie? Where were Norman and Hartnell and Richard Todd? What was everyone thinking as a very average girl walked from one of the biggest fashion houses in London? Anita is wearing a black House of DeVille cocktail dress with a flattering cinched waist and fluttering crimped skirt. She is accompanied by my new pets, Norman and Belinda, named for the fashion icons in our midst this evening, Mr. DeVille continued. "Sorry, folks, but these 2 are not available to adopt from Hampton House. I swooped in and grabbed these babies last night." There was another round of applause. "Step right, step left," Anita told herself, repeating the words over and over as Norman and Belinda headed straight to the worker who was waving the dog treats in her hand. Anita knew she was supposed to stop at the mark at the end of the row and turn left, turn right, with her free hand on her wrist. So she counted down. 2 more steps, she told herself as she saw the mark approaching. She stopped and gave a slight tug on the leashes, and the dog stopped too. "But I know what you're all wondering about this evening. What is that exquisite necklace around Anita's neck? It needs no introduction. It is the famed Weatherby appearing for the first time in public." There was more applause, and Anita imagined her parents being part of this moment. Was Mom happy seeing Anita up there, showcasing their family heirloom? Would requests to loan out the diamond come in after tonight's viewing? She hoped she could make that happen for her mom and dad. She wanted them to feel more secure. She didn't want money to always be on their mind. But what did she want for herself? Standing on stage like this was what her mom had always wanted, and now Anita was here. She was standing among London's elite. Did that make her popular? Did she even care if she was? "You don't need a diamond to shine," she heard Anita say, and she knew her friend was right. Anita could enjoy being on display for one evening, but she couldn't imagine this being her life. She wanted a world that was quieter, one where she wasn't being judged for the dress she was wearing or the diamonds around her neck. She wished Mum embraced their differences rather than constantly be pushing her to be someone she wasn't. See me, she wanted to yell, but this was a conversation to be had later. 2 minutes feel really long, she decided. Anita looked out at the anonymous faces and tried to find one to look on, to steady herself. Think of their undergarments, she told herself, remembering Roger's advice. But that made her want to laugh. She looked down at Norman and Belinda again, being so good and patient, eating their bones as Anita waited for her cue to turn back. Head up, she could almost hear Stella say in her head. Focus. Anita looked out at the room again and tried to lock in on the back doors. The exit. That's what you'll be doing before you know it, she told herself. Just breathe. Breathe. That was when she heard a whistle, like the type Miss Norbert used at the shelter. It wasn't a human whistle sound, not a cat call or praise. High-pitched and airy, different from any instrument. It was not coming from the piano Mr. Radcliffe was playing. It was the type of training whistle she'd heard them use when they were teaching the dogs commands. Anita looked around, confused. The shelter worker was not wearing a whistle. Neither was the one waiting back at the end of the stage. It was so faint. She wondered if she'd been mistaken. No one in the audience seemed to react, but Norman and Belinda were standing at attention now. The whistle blew again, and this time Norman and Belinda started to pace. Her eyes scanned the room, looking for someone who could have the offending instrument. It couldn't be someone in the audience. The black-tied crowd wouldn't be sitting in their seats, blowing whistles as if they were at a football match. No, this had to be coming from elsewhere. Anita strained her eyes and made out a few people standing along the back wall. The whistle blew again, faint but high-pitched, but the dogs started to pull against the leash, growing restless as if they'd been given a command they weren't being allowed to follow. Anita looked at the people in the back of the room again, and she spotted a man with a whistle. He was standing close to another man, and their outlines were distinctly familiar, one short and squat and the other tall and spindly. They both had on waiters' uniforms. Norman started to howl, and then Belinda did too. Anita held tight to the leashes, not sure what to do. Who were those two men? Were they the pair from yesterday who claimed to be security? The ones who were with Bennett? Why were they blowing a whistle? Once again, Anita and Norman and Belinda and the Weatherby, Mr. DeVille exclaimed, and Anita knew that was her cue again. She needed to get off the stage before something went wrong. She started to turn, and the dogs followed, quickly taking the lead. People applauded as Anita shakily walked slowly back up the catwalk. Almost done. Almost, she thought, spying the curtains getting closer. But then the whistle blasted again, louder and longer this time, and Norman and Belinda stopped suddenly. That was when Anita heard barking, and it was coming from the Dalmatians. Someone was shouting. The curtain was swaying. The ground beneath her started to rumble as something burst through the curtains. A pack of dogs headed right towards her. Norman and Belinda started to pull, looking frightened by the stampede. Anita started to panic. The catwalk was so narrow, she didn't know which way to turn to get out of their way, but there was no time to even decide. Within seconds, a collie was barreling over her, knocking her to the ground and causing her to let go of Norman's and Belinda's leashes as a group of other dogs, big and small, piled on. Was she about to be mauled? Anita put up her hands in horror, wondering for a split second what was happening, before she felt a dog lick her face. She opened her eyes. All the dogs were licking her face, nudging her to get up, wagging their tails happily as if they wanted to play, not cause harm. Anita heard screaming and turned her head. More dogs were coming, jumping from the stage and into the crowd, knocking over chairs and causing people to panic in the commotion. Anita scrambled to get up, take hold of Norman and Belinda, and get off the stage with a shred of dignity intact. But the dogs wouldn't let her move. They just kept piling on as if she were hiding dog treats somewhere in the folds of her skirt. She could see Mr. DeVille running towards her as several audience members jumped up and scampered onto the runway to try to free her. "Anita, are you all right?" Mr. DeVille said as he pulled her to standing and people grabbed dogs' collars one by one to try to pull them away. "What happened? Where did they all come from?" Anita looked around, horrified. The audience was on their feet, unsure if this was part of the show or an accident. "I'm all right," Anita said, feeling very embarrassed, her heart still beating fast. She reached up to touch her chest and tried to calm herself and saw Mr. DeVille gasp in horror. Anita didn't need to ask why. The moment she felt her collarbone, she knew. "The Weatherby!" she exclaimed. "It's gone!"